What's up, y'all? This is Mike, Super Mike. This is Super Mike. I'm always working, trying to do things, make things happen. Got plans, trying to upgrade life. So that's what you got going on with me. Regular dude. I'm gonna touch on this topic today. You know, my take, my opinion on ethnic and interracial relationships and marriages, and also I'm going to use the term natural relationships as far as same racial relationships. So, please hit like, even if you don't like it. Just hit it. Just touch like. And I think I might touch a couple other subjects. But, Well, one of my favorite content creators, Philip Scott, he did a interview on his podcast. He has a podcast on Spotify. And by the way, I donate to his show. I'm a firm believer that we as a collective should own and support the watchdogs of our community. And some people take a leadership role in that. And if you take a leadership role and you're sincere in your heart, the public, like us, we should support those people. I mean, I think we should take $50 or whatever your budget, like whatever, $10, something. I mean, if you buy $10 worth of potato chips a month, I feel that you could put that get you a $10 and find you some good somebody who's expressing your views out into that public. Send them that encouragement so that they can continue. Because what that does is it votes. When they see that dollar, they're gonna be like, "Oh, someone loves me," and at that dollar, you might get them 99 cents. But it's encouragement. So there's worthy causes out here. And really and truly, according to most of the statistics, there are, especially from black population, we got at least 16 million wage earners. At least 16 million, probably 20 million wage earners out here. If we gave $18 a year, we would have to smart people who are doing things in good categories, we would get a lot of progress done. We'll be able to solve a lot of our own problems. We'll be able to provide a lot of jobs for ourselves. So number one, get out of that culture of not using your money as voting. We can vote for stuff every day with our dollars. So vote for your people every day. Use your dollars. Go ahead and donate to your favorite not only content creators, but your favorite causes. A school that you like. Donate to, a person who's providing good information. Donate to your church, your mosque, your synagogue. Get into donating. A lot of people got out of the church, but you're not recycling that dollar. And that's what we need. We got to have those dollars recycled into our community that goes to develop ourselves. These things develop us. Okay? And we do get returns on that. It makes life easier. It makes our goals easier to achieve when we have the knowledge out here to help us, and also people who are creating things, they create resources to help others, to help lots of people get their goals and answer their own problems. So we need that, and we have to support those things. So that's a good thing. Now, I'm gonna give a little background on how I came to my calculation on interracial relationships, and I'll tell you straight up, I don't encourage. Well, there's a couple of levels to look at this stuff, and I'm coming from a black perspective, and that's just how I deal with it, from my experience. And also, and by the way, to people who say your experience means nothing, that's pretty ignorant, because this world loves to tell you that your opinion is meaningless, yet they take opinion polls all the time. Your opinion is very important. Now, your opinion is not factual all the time. Now, a lot of times our opinions are based on facts, but your opinion is very valid, because we are human beings and we are very powerful people. We are powerful. So our opinions matter. And that's the reason why education, proper and good education, is really a human right. You must educate the human being properly, otherwise people will form opinions, and large numbers of people with misguided information will have misguided opinions, which create turmoil on the whole planet, because that's how powerful the human being is. So your opinion does matter. Never let anyone tell you your opinion doesn't matter. Even if you have an incorrect or unsustainable opinion, it matters, but it may not be functional. So my opinion is based on my teaching from the Nation of Islam. Also, and those teachings do inform my foundation on how I see the patterns. So when we go to interracial, first of all, I believe that race is a construct. It does exist, because anything that exists in a number inside of our minds and we actualize as a large group, it does exist. So that is real. Our thinking becomes reality, so that you have to deal with that. Race is a concept, and it's a concept that millions and billions of us have, and so therefore it exists. So these categories of race, they've been in lockstep for hundreds and hundreds of years. They are a creation that's developed by they are the inferior, genetic inferiors of the most people on the planet, genetically inferior. The white people, and they did this as a survival mechanism, according to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing in ISIS papers, which she laid out a case, and guess what? It is working. It is a great, I believe it's a great analysis, and the analysis continues to bear fruit. So I believe that her analysis is close enough to a reality in the thinking of these people. So she laid out that they feared genetic annihilation. Now, of course, all of them couldn't fear genetic annihilation, otherwise they wouldn't do mixed races, right? So we have different categories Now, this is white people I'm talking about. People that's classified as white. Now, we have a people that's classified as white. And this is another thing. Here's my take on what's classified as mixed race. I don't believe from this perspective, in this definition of race, there's no real such thing as a mixed race. See, because race is about blood plus the identity, plus the self-identity. So you have to have enough of the genetic lineage to identify, but you also have to have this self-awareness to self-identify. So someone like a Sean King, he's what is appropriately termed as a quadroon because his mother was mulatto, and his, I guess, a father was white. But he's visibly not completely white, you can tell. But he could go straight up white. But he was rejected. And see, that's another thing, rejection. It's very, very interesting. He was rejected by whites, but accepted by black people. And he does identify as black. That does come along with some negatives, but I'm not talking about that at this moment. You know, and I believe he has the right, the blood right, to identify as black. And I don't care what. I understand the other side of some of us who, because these racial categories, you got to realize that this is actually just made up. But the only reason why it's not intelligent to ignore a racial category that was made up by a genetic recessive group of people in power, you can't ignore it, because we have to resolve the unequal treatment done by a specific category before, and we got to have that balance happen. Then we can do away with this thing called racial category. You can't just ignore a racial category without balancing the inequity, because then you would have an unbalanced. You would have a group of folks, a group of people that fell into certain categories that had unbalanced benefits, and then you would have a group of people who had unbalanced, severely unbalanced negative aspects, and those people were categorized. So even if I categorize the people as, I could have said people with green eyes. Anybody with green eyes, we're going to systematically oppress them. Then if I did this over 1,000 years or 100 years or something, you can't just, we're just going to ignore that. That doesn't happen anymore. You have to resolve that. Otherwise, you'll have an imbalance. Can't just ignore it, because those people would not actually get over. They've been traumatized. So the steps have to be taken to rebalance. So once those steps, and there are steps that can rebalance anything. So once these steps are taken, and then we'll start getting a great perspective on both sides of these equations, then we'll say, okay, now we'll be able to tell based on the condition and based on the history of of what we did to rectify the situation. And then we'll say, okay, now we don't really need that category of racial group anymore. Because really, according to not only science, first of all, like I said, I'm in the Nation of Islam. I 100% agree with Dr. Yaqub, the messenger. Honorable Elijah Muhammad told us that he was taught by God that Dr. Yaqub came up with these white folks. He came up with a system of selective breeding, and that happened to selectively breed because he wanted to create a group of people with all recessive traits. He found that there was a dominant and a recessive code for every characteristic that we have physically. There's a dominant and a recessive coding for every characteristic.
There's a 6-minute slowdown caused by a crash in 5 miles. You are still on the fastest route.
So what he did is he selectively bred. He wanted to actually see it. That's what scientists do. He wanted to actually see it, and so he bred a group of folks out. I'm not going to go into the whole story. You just look up Dr. Yaqub, Patmos Island, all that. You can find that if you're not aware of that story. Dr. Yaqub, the making of the white man. So I believe it, because even the science coming out, and it does nothing but further confirm that original story that we got, almost 100 years ago now. It's about 80 years ago. So these folks are really just a part of the original people that have been selectively bred into their current condition. Now, they are a pack of what Cynthia G calls struggle genes. They're just a collection of struggle genes. These people are very sickly because they're predominantly recessive, and the white people that we see today are not how they were 4,000 years ago, because over time they've gotten a lot of our mixtures, and so they are a little bit more hardier than they were a little while ago, because they struggle genes. So the point is, you have to make all these considerations when you're doing when you're doing interracial. So and I said all that to go into this category of race. This is a concept that is a protection mechanism that was actually created by the white folks, what we call white people, which is it is white supremacy. That is their religion, but really it's the white inferiority that they realize in their genetic situation, because as soon as they mix, then they they almost pretty much cease to exist. They cease to look like they are white. And so you have to, and right now, you see, I really don't have a technical problem with people who fall in love with each other. True love, not, these, people get into these little slave narratives, the whiteness. You got a problem if you're falling in love because somebody is white, or they're somehow better, or, you can clean that problem up. You got to have that knowledge of self. But if you're looking at your own people, because to me, I'm so happy. I've never been attracted to white women. I can look at them and tell if they were a beautiful white woman or not. I'm looking at it, okay, that's a good looking white woman. But it's just like I don't have nothing there for them at all. And actually, they're kind of funny acting. They're really irritating, actually. For me, most of them. Just never really got along with them too much either way. Even when I used to work with them, they just always expect. I don't know what they're expecting, but I never really liked them. I never really had too many friends that were white women. Never. So, but a lot of guys like them, brothers. For some reason, they think that that's something, a big deal. You got to deal with that, because see, there's a lot of different dynamics that we're dealing with especially when you have two groups of people who are at war. That's not smart. And black and white are at war. This is a war. This is what you call a 500-year war currently. that we're dealing with. And this is how that kind of war looks. It's a normal practice for every generation that's born in it. But one group subjugates another. And that's what we're dealing with. And when you're in that situation, which we are, you know, you got a big problem when you start mixing with a group that has the power to oppress you, especially when they are dealing with a collective instinct of genetic annihilation, which especially is being made more public because their media is flat out saying it. This is what we're dealing with. We're scared of dying off. Europe is at record low birth rates of white people. They got the Muslims moving in there, all this migration. Trump is scared of all the, what they call it, these people were here way before the white folks were, which they call illegal immigrants. And, you know, but you have all that problem. And so, of course, they're hyper aggressive against genetic annihilation, especially the more studied of them, the ones who study more. They're hyper aggressive against that. So when you walk into that rat's nest, you're going to get in trouble. And so, you know, when you make the decision to mate with someone, if I'm in a relationship with let's say a woman that is from Mexico, or a woman that is I don't know, from the islands, or I don't know, just or even Australian or something like that, Aborigine, or Thailand or Vietnam, or some different group of folks. You know, these are different racial categories, but even ethnic categories where they have a different history, like Nigeria or Somalian and Eritrean, and all of these are black folks, but they have a different background. You know, our histories don't match up until, 500 years. And then we start matching up. So right now our cultures are totally pretty much different. So when you mix up with that, you have to know the history of that group so that you know what to expect from that what does that person expect as they grow up in a family, in a relationship. Okay, you should know that stuff. What do you expect? You see, you should know something about their history. How are you going to teach their children? You and those children are going to be part of both of you. You should both know each other's history so that the children will be complete. Now, when you do that, if I was to do that with any other group, no other group is threatened by Black American history except white Americans. So if I was to get with a white woman and I start teaching my black children about our history here in America, the history that we have with the Columbus, with Native American history, which is some of our family, with the different situation with the African situations, and all of our history, and even, our just when we start going through our history, and then the white woman start going through her history. Washington, George Washington, Robert E. Lee, and all of these great white people that they love, Christopher Columbus. These are people who they admire. Okay, we're going to have a clash here, right? Because the kid has the genes of the villain, well, from my perspective, they will be villains. And then maybe from the other perspective, they're heroes. So now what you're doing is you're having that kid make a choice. And see, that's where we have a lot of problems. We have these, what we call coons. We have traitors. We have confused people. People that feel they have to make a choice because the war is still ongoing. The war is still ongoing. These are situations that you can't just sit there and ignore. And you can ignore it, but then you sentence another generation to willful ignorance, and you're gonna just ignore it. Offer them a great childhood, and they're gonna grow up, go out there, and get smacked in the face with it because you're not dealing with it. So they're gonna have to deal with it. You're just kicking the bucket, generation, and that puts people in a lot of different situations, and it's not good. And we don't do the work of this. All is really work, because I've studied to the point where I don't even have anger too much. Well, I have what you call some anger, but I don't have the general anger against white people, because they're just a group of humans. They're just a group of people, and their work was necessary to develop humanity, because somebody had to be the bad guy on the planet to kick us in the ass as a planetary group. So, but they've done their job, and now it's time for them to be, taken from the power. But, as long as they do good and do their own thing, we don't have to have a situation of what you call revenge and all. We don't have to do them that way. We don't, because we don't want to be subject to the same punishment eventually that they're dealing with now, because right now they're suffering. Just justice is suffering to white people. Equality is suffering to them. That's how they look at it. That's why they hate it. So, I don't think there's a such thing as interracial, because you're not two races. You're going to identify. If you say that you're mixed race, that means you're black. Because you don't want to make that choice. That's only black people do that. You see what I'm saying? If you say, okay, let's say even if you're Vietnamese, that's a country, that's a nationality, that's not a race. The races are yellow, black, brown, red, white. That is racial category groups. If you say anything else, that is not race. That is country. That is nationality. The racial categories are they do exist. You can't ignore them. That would be dumb. But they're only created to classify groups of people for the benefit of white people who they still are in power right now. So we still have to deal with racial categories until they fall from power and we're able to call the shots and create the rules. You can eliminate race by being the one that can actually create rules and enforce those rules. So you have to have you have to not only have the will, you have to have the power. Until you do that,
in half a mile, keep left to continue on I-205 East.
Until you do that, you're gonna still be dealing with race. And so, that's why I don't believe there's a such thing as mixed race, because you're gonna either call yourself white or you're gonna call yourself something else that means you're not white. And if you're not yellow, and you're not brown, and you're not red, then you're black. And that's why they say a one-drop rule. That's the reason why, because it's about your team. It's about your team. Now, if you on team white now, for example, if you can pass for white completely, people treat you as white, then you're white. You white. If you don't, you are white. Because you act white, you own white people's team, you look white, you got the blood of white, they treat you as white, you white. And if you now white will accept, because they're losing their population all over the planet Earth, they have been accepting others as white. So the Aryan, they accept what they call Arabians. That doesn't matter if you're dark skinned or black. I mean, as far as physically, genetically, if you come in, you say you're Arabian, you're considered white. The so-called Latino, they're able to choose white. They're considered white. I mean, they know they're not what they call European Anglo-Saxon white, but just for the purpose of white supremacy, you're on team white. So, you know, that's just some of my points. I just wanted to touch base on that. Blah, blah, blah. My talking.